Republican U.S. Senate candidate Eric Hovde campaigning today in Fond du Lac and Winnebago County in a race that's now considered to be a toss-up based on recent polling. Hovde is conducting a Time for Change bus tour across Wisconsin. Today he told supporters he feels confident as the race winds down during these final days of campaigning.
Senator Baldwin's been in Washington for 26 years in politics, basically her whole life. And everybody realizes the country needs to go in a better direction. So I feel really good of the energy, the enthusiasm, and we're just going to run as hard as I possibly can through the finish line.
Also this week, Democratic Senator Tammy Baldwin wrapped up her statewide bus tour with a visit to Appleton. We also caught up with her about the state of the race with potential control of the U.S. Senate on the line.
I think people understand in a battleground state like Wisconsin that it's up to citizens to talk to their neighbors, talk to their friends, canvass, make phone calls in order to get out the vote. This will come down to turnout in our state, and the energy has been very exciting.
Baldwin is seeking her third term in office.